Well, ladies and gentlemen, I don't usually do a video on a Saturday, but how can I not? There's just so much to talk about. But before I get on to the main video of today, can I yet again remind you, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. And if you'd like to support the work that I do here, you're welcome to buy me a coffee. Anyway, let's get straight into it because there's a lot to cover. So, if you're in the know, you'll know that last year, a bunch of Republican lawmakers proposed a bill. And the bill effectively was to have the trade with South Africa analyzed. The basic idea was that South Africa wasn't really acting in the best interest of the United States. And so there were some lawmakers that basically said that the view to trading with South Africa, specifically in relation to AGOA, should be put forward for a review. Effectively, if we no longer fit the criteria, in other words, we're operating not in the best interest of the United States, that AGOA should be cancelled and South Africa should be penalized as a result. Now, Joe Biden's administration met with the South African administration and they all decided to play kumbayas. And the bill effectively disappeared. And there was a lot of discussion at the time whether AGOA was effectively going to be cancelled. And obviously the outcome was, well, it wasn't. So Q 2025, and what's actually happened is that piece of legislation has now effectively had the words 2024 scrubbed from it and the words 2025 put back onto it. And effectively they have a brand new bill going before the US House of Representatives, which is calling for personal sanctions against ANC leaders. Now, if you've been watching the channel, you know that we've been calling this for some time, and the rhetoric seems to be escalating daily. Now, there's a reason for this, and the United States highlights the Kill the Boer song as being one of the reasons, also the Bella Bill, the targeting of Afrikaans language, and also the threats to the survival of Afrikaners. So for those of you who are looking at it going, it's AFRI Forum's fault, well, effectively, it's human rights violations. However, it doesn't just end there. It also goes further to state that the Zondo Commission report is also a major influence of this, in that they're picking up on the widespread corruption amongst ANC leaders and saying, well, effectively, this is a corrupt regime and they need to be penalized. Furthermore, there's the actions of the ANC leaders and their ties with Iran and Hamas. All of these things together have basically meant that, according to this bill, a comprehensive review of South Africa's foreign policy and our decisions on how we protect human rights and minority communities all mean that basically the United States says all those in violation of these things should be sanctioned. Now, that effectively could mean ANC leaders, EFF leaders, MK party leaders. It could be any of those individuals. Numerous people in the MK party obviously have been implicated in the Zondo Report Commission. Numerous individuals in the EFF are implicated in Kill the Boer singing of those songs. And it could be key members of the ANC who are directly engaged with Hamas and Iran. So effectively, we've got three of the main parties in South Africa all being fingered by these US targeted sanctions. Now, the actual individual who's promoting this piece of legislation is Congressman Ronnie Jackson. And Ronald Lamola has basically said that his reason or rationality for proposing this bilateral relations review, he says that the entire rationality behind it is based on lies, untruths, and propaganda spread about South Africa's foreign policy amongst the various individuals. In other words, we're not doing the things they say we are. Even though they tell you that they're doing the things that we say they're doing, don't believe your lying eyes. You see, that's not the only act being proposed, with the AFRI Act also being put before Congress, which is set to help persecuted farmers. Now, for the first time ever, we're actually getting an introduction to this, and we're actually starting to see what it looks like. And for all those individuals who criticized me way back when, going, oh, you said it was asylum and it's refugee status and blah, blah, blah. And I deliberately told everybody, hang 10, wait for the documentation before you pass comment. Well, you will notice that the actual framework is being introduced as asylum for farmers and refugees. Very interesting the way that it's being framed, but effectively, it talks about Afrikaner ethnic minority groups that have suffered persecution or have a well-founded fear of persecution on account of their race, ethnicity, or ancestry, and that what the actual act is intending to do is to give priority to refugee status to spouses, children, and parents of individuals so long as they are a resident of South Africa. Also very interesting that it says resident, because that implies that you don't have to be a citizen. In any case, that's just speculation. In any case, the act actually moves forward to grant Afrikaners refugee status in the United States. And the rationality given is, yet again, as I'm sure you can imagine, the massive human rights violations. At least that's the allegation, right? The allegation of massive human rights violations. So what does this actually all mean? Well, what it means is that the actual trade between South Africa and America is firmly in the crosshairs of the United States. And that no matter how much the ANC tries to downplay what's going on, if this review is successful, all trade with the United States may be subject to heavy tariffs or possibly even direct sanctions. Now, if you go for direct sanctions, then as much as I hate to say it, as a South African citizen who loves to live in my country, yeah, you get Zimbabwe number 2. Like, effectively, you are sanctioning the wazoos out the country, cannot trade with the country, money has difficulty going in and out, you place in the sanctions list. That means going around the world is tough. However, it does look like, based on the actual legislation, that the intention of it is not actually to penalize the country, but actually to penalize the ANC leaders, which may mean that effectively South Africa is spared the brunt of the sanctions, but the ANC leaders are not. And that's going to hurt, like big time hurt. So ANC leaders and those implicated in Zondo and members of the EFF may really want to review their life and see how they intend to go forward, because life, if this is successful, may not be as easy as it was before. Saying that if the actual trade relations do deteriorate, then the likely outcome is, well, probably tariffs. But considering Trump has already imposed tariffs, it's unlikely that he'll impose further ones. I suppose what we really could say is that we lose a goer. That may be, in the best case scenario, the best eventuality, and probably the most likely at this point in time. So my prediction at this point in time is we lose a goer, the ANC leaders get sanctioned up the wazoo, and that's pretty much the end of it. Now, you might ask yourself the question, why is this all ramping up? And actually, it's because, well, of the ANC's own incompetence. According to the news, this is actually all information that the US has had for some time, but nobody's actually been willing to actually action it or actually act on it. And Trump's administration is very much willing to act on it. Now, the outcome of this and why it's become such a prominent issue at the moment is because there is nobody in the United States to directly negotiate with them. We've lost our ambassador, they've been kicked out, and numerous individuals in high-ranking positions are being kicked out of the United States every day. In fact, just the other day, another member was kicked out of the United States for, well, corruption. It's always corruption. And you see, this appears to be the reason or the rationality for all the action being taken against South Africa. A further issue appears to actually be, and would you believe it, the GNU of all things. With the DA about to leave government, the ability to negotiate with the ANC has been well determined as being not a thing they want to do. And because of the political shake-up in the United States, the way it's been sold to the lawmakers is that effectively Cyril's pushed out his largest opposition or his largest ally. And that is kind of like a dictatorial move. And as a result, there's no one to negotiate with in South Africa, because the reality is the United States doesn't want to negotiate with the ANC. They don't find it to be beneficial. They seem to believe that the ANC lies, and all they want to do is push propaganda. And to be honest, they kind of got a point. But in any case, the one thing that we can all confidently say is that the ANC is facing a backlash. It's facing a backlash because of its ties to China, to Russia, to Iran. It's facing a backlash because of its policy. It's facing a backlash because for 30 years it got a clean pass and they neglected it. Rather than use it to build a nation, they used it to divide the world. They went there to say, we want to side with all the commies and all the commie nations. And the Western nations, well, they're all sellouts and colonizers. But unfortunately, the chickens are coming home to roost. You can't take these political lines forever without there being consequences, and consequences there are. Now, according to a business community, they have said to John Steenhuisen and Ramaphosa, please don't fall out because we need the GNU. If the GNU collapses, business leaves South Africa. Hope in South Africa fades, and we're already seeing that in the relationships with the United States. South Africa hopes or intends to repair the relationship with the United States, but they don't know who to negotiate with because the United States doesn't want to negotiate with the ANC. So really, they need the DA, but it does look like the DA is about to leave the GNU. And so what's the consequence of this? Well, as of today, the rand hit 19 rand to $1. And according to the threats of sanctions, the GNU jitters and the Trump tariffs, yeah, the economy ain't looking that great. Things are not looking great for South Africa at the moment. In any case, this is all my views. Please do let me know what you think in the comment section below. Until Monday, bye.